Hey there, welcome to episode 61 of the Quaggling Sand audio program. I am your host, Dan Hugo. We are recording this on the late evening of January 7. It's Tuesday night, 2025. I'm almost certainly going to say 2024 through at least one of my audio programs this month, if I haven't already. But be certain it is 2025, for better or worse. The hour is late. It is 10:32 p.m. on Tuesday. Normally, I've been recording these sometime on the day of publication. Quaggling Sand comes out on Wednesday. But today was day one. Tuesday was day one of CES 2025, the Consumer Electronics Show here in Vegas, one of the largest trade shows that Vegas hosts. Not one of the largest events. New Year's Eve was allegedly 400,000, and CES is typically a little bit less than half that. So there you go. CES this week, day two. I will be headed down to the convention center when I would normally record this, so I have an opportunity this evening, and here we are. If you're not familiar with the Quaggling Sand audio program, Quaggling Sand is a thing I came up with, a term. When I was very young, it's something that you probably know as pins and needles. It's the return of circulation to maybe a limb, maybe a foot or a leg or an arm or a hand. Maybe you fell asleep on your arm. Maybe you were sitting hilariously on your leg or something, and it went numb as the sensation returns. The pins and needles, or as I called it, quaggling sand. This is a vanity audio production. I tell stories. They may or may not have some meaning. They may or may not resonate with you. Maybe you'll take something from one or more of them. That remains to be seen or heard. So episode 61 is Why Engineering? Why did I get into this? Why am I still into this? 61 episodes on this, the 7th of January, to be published on the 8th. If you are able to locate wherever you found this episode, the show notes, the episode description, which contains the show notes, there's a summary that I will read. Then there are three links for today's episode. 2, the usual shameless self-promotion, and 1, a reference to an infamous and most likely, it's been shown and proven to be valid, so we'll say it's probably a very high likelihood that it's a correct and true thing, and it will be relevant sometime near the end of this episode. So let's take steps to reach that and begin. The show notes for today's episode, the summary is, I have always been interested in just about everything. I have always been interested in just about everything. And while there was a long period of time during which I really wanted to be a pilot in the United States Air Force, the underlying and unifying theme of my path into my own future was always going to be something nerdy. And so this has been the case. And then there's an ellipsis. The links for today's episode, the usual shameless self-promotion. You do not need to spend any money here. You can if you want. And at some point, I will probably institute some way of exchanging time for money. But these particular choices will not pursue that particular path. I was thinking about trying out enabling advertising on Spotify, but I'm cautiously pessimistic about pursuing that. Anyway, buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo, DANHUGO, and Ko-fi.com, KO-fi.com/Dan Hugo. Yes, I know it's probably also coffee, but they're spelled differently. So buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo. If you go there, there's a profile page. It has links to, it's sort of a free-form link tree. So I have all my links to audio programs, to GitHub projects. There's a little background information on yours truly. There's a few links to my favorite coffee beans on which any proceeds are spent. And at the top of the profile page, there's a post link. The posts section of Buy Me a Coffee enables the posting of audio, so I'm able to upload actual audio programs. And so, I think we're 7 episodes in, or 8. The Buy Me an Update micro episodes published on Mondays. About 4 minutes, 4.5, like under 5 minutes. A quick rundown on the previous episodes. It's published on Monday morning. So what happened last week in the exciting world of my audio programming, and then what's coming up this week. So for example, it's CES week. So you can check that out if you like. Ko-fi.com, more of a text update scheme. They allow linking to audio. So I do that. I do the text updates. They're the ability to link to audio on Ko-fi.com does not include linking to Buy Me a Coffee audio posts. So there you go. So Ko-fi.com/DanHugo for textual updates now and then. These are both tools used often by open source creators, people creating content in general, people working on projects. It's an easy way to engage the public. It's something I don't need to maintain myself. So there's some utility. I've had these 2 accounts for years, and so they remain. Check them out if you like, and listen in on Buy Me an Update. Again, it's under 5 minutes every Monday. I'm trying it out, see how it works. Finally, the Lego letter to which I referred. It is a Snopes verified item, and so I'm linking to the Snopes link. I'm including the Snopes link. So Snopes.com, fact check. What is it? Equa Lego I don't know why it says that. Equa Lego TV or Thai? I don't know what that means. The URL is strange. You'll have to click on it and see. But there's a photo it posted of the Lego letter and the details of the story and how some people thought it was false and a bogus. Somebody invented this letter. They argued that typography was not in keeping with the time frame, which was in the 70s sometime. But it's been verified by statements from Lego. You can read about that. It's been published in the Telegraph, the Independent. Some articles may or may not be around. So I figured I would just post to the verification, evidence, and so on. The text of the letter is something I will get to at the end of this episode, but it is somewhat relevant, and I do actually refer to this occasionally. It's a good bullet item in history, especially when it comes to innovation and young people. I was just correcting. Lego, fun fact, is capital L, capital E, capital G, capital O, if you want to be pedantic. And I think it's Lego plastic bricks. They are not Legos, plural, and so on. So we'll give them that, the Lego letter. And now on with the show. So reading has always been fundamental. It's probably been told to you that way. Reading, it's important. You should do it. If you're not doing it now, you should get into it. I would have to say that this all started when I was learning to read, which took place at a very young age, thanks to my mother and to Dr. Seuss. I've mentioned this before. Between reading and learning early on to interact with people of all ages at some level, I wasn't exactly having political discussions at age 4 with our neighbors, but I was interacting with our neighbors and people of my own age, people a little bit older, people a lot older, etc. So being able to interact with people in a useful way comes in handy. I wasn't always, I think I got worse at it and then better at it over time, but it's a good skill to have. But most definitely reading, even more important. So I was able to pursue my curiosities that much easier by being able to read. Now, when I first learned how to read, I was reading Dr. Seuss. I wasn't exactly reading technical jargon and the works of the great learned folks. I wasn't reading econ treatise and so on. But I was on the road to getting there. So learning to read, critical step. I will say immediately, any inherent intellectual curiosity in anyone at any age should be enabled and encouraged, not stifled in any way. This is something we have seen for a long time, I think, too long. And when it comes to gender bias presumptions about, who should be interested in what, for example, and at what age, I think this is where things have gone a little bit wrong. These sorts of pre-programming activities and beliefs should have ended generations ago, but we should put a stop to it where you are and where you find it now. The second best time to stop telling, little girls they should be playing with dolls and little boys they should be playing with trucks. The best time to stop that was 200 years ago when there were trucks, I guess. But the second best time is now, so ponder. Once I was able to read in the usual measure, reading grade level, that's how, you're reading at a grade 2 years above, or, wherever you are. It's something I was able to increase fairly quickly, if I recall correctly. So I was able to tackle more and more interesting stuff fairly early. And also interacting with people, that's very important. I could find out things for myself sometimes. I could ask questions, and I could find books to read occasionally. Occasionally Dr. Seuss would let me down. So, I would find something else. I've already talked in a previous episode about my home away from home, the library, and how even today my library card is usually quite warm. Although I very rarely go into a library, a lot more digital books now. I could find out things for myself, which was good. I continue to do that, and often try to consume information from various viewpoints, which makes for a better, well-rounded picture of what's going on. I would eventually become an insatiable reader of just about anything. I used to read the back of the cereal box before I would head off to school early in the morning, even though it was the same cereal box as yesterday. You put those letters in front of me, and I would immediately begin forming words. The encyclopedia. So my parents got an encyclopedia set at some point. This was important in the early days. I have spoken before about going to the library. Hey, I just did that immediately before. And getting plenty of books on a variety of topics. But in the pre-internet days, a set of encyclopedia was as good as it got. To have one at home, right there, waiting to be perused at a moment's notice. Hey, what does it mean? Or what is that? Or when did that happen? Crack open I think this set was just numbered. I can't remember if it was, I'm sure there was some sort of indexing scheme that is escaping me. Anyway, those books were there for the taking. I don't know if I had a bookmark in every volume, but at some point I received a desktop-oriented stack of square-colored note papers. You'd keep them on your desk in a little square box with the side cut out, so you could very quickly reach the topmost slice of paper and jot down something. So I would use those as bookmarks. They were not sticky; they were just square, reasonably small, and those were my preferred bookmarkers. That was it. I seem to recall there were many of them sticking out of the top of most of the volumes. It might have been all. I don't know. I don't know how far I got. I have to be honest, though, I don't know how effective those bookmarks really were. They were like breadcrumbs. Did I work backwards along the path that I already followed? More important, though, probably not. Once bookmarked, it was sort of it was almost like a check box, check mark. Yep, okay, read that one. I'm sure occasionally I would come back to things, but I wasn't returning to them. Why? Because I just read about it. No, I'm not claiming to remember every word I've ever read and the page numbers and so on, but it would be added to my own personal Rolodex of references. Most important was this reflexive visit to the encyclopedia and eventually to the library, later to the internets, to look up the thing I was curious about, the thing I had any questions about, the thing that was standing between now and understanding or advancing some cause. I know how to find the information I need. That is very handy. to say the least. Public school. I never wanted to skip grades just because I thought that it might come back to bite me at some point. And from my experiences with young people moving up into classroom and school settings 4 or more years or so, skipped has had a lot to, they've had a lot to deal with. Ultimately, this was the right choice for me to remain in my social lane, if you like. I certainly interacted with older people, but I think if you skip grades, you set expectations, or there's just an odd, well, this is back in the, this is years ago. Things may have changed for the better or for the worse, not sure. But back in my day, I I would see people who skipped grades would just be unduly noticed, or they would receive extra attention for the wrong reasons, and so on. So to me, remaining in the grade I was actually in with the classmates I was learning with, but taking advanced classes or interacting with older students or pursuing extracurricular education, etc., all these things were a better fit for me. This didn't mean I couldn't take those advanced classes. Like I just said, I should read my own notes after I write them. I should then read them. Like taking geometry at Washington High School, when we, my two fellow classmates in this circumstance, we were in 8th grade and we had exhausted the junior high school math curriculum, despite the best efforts of one Zeke Ashley. But that was one class we had to take up the street, so I didn't have to skip any grades or anything. We just go up to Washington High School in the morning, take our geometry class from Mr. Lujan, and then we would jump on the city bus and travel the mile from, was it a mile or 2 miles? From the corner near Washington High School to Royal Palm Junior High School and get on about our day. No major upheaval, and also not sitting in a classroom taking a class that doesn't get anywhere. So I wasn't sitting in, some algebra class, which would have been taught by Zeke Ashley, and he was the finest math teacher available anywhere at the time. Good person, good at teaching, but he had a class to teach and couldn't cater to 3 people. Boredom is a real intellectual killer, best to be avoided. So if you're sitting in a class, or if your students or your anyone is sitting in a classroom bored, they're wasting their time. They're wasting everyone's time. Put that energy to better use. But because the 3 of us stayed in our appointed grade level mostly, our social adaptation didn't have to be risked. So there wasn't a question of, you're the kid in the class. I had that when I was in, a little aside here, I didn't write this down, but when I was in when I was in 3rd grade, I had the same teacher for 6th and 3rd grades, Debbie Reeker. And she said, hey, running errands is helpful, but not useful. What if we get Dan into the 7th grade science lab? And Mr. Bartholomew, the teacher, he was fine with it. I was sitting at a lab bench with 3 other students that were in 7th grade, and I was in 3rd grade. So this was weird. It wasn't bad. Eventually, they all kind of, it became a non-issue, but it was certainly weird at first. And it was very weird when occasionally they would ask me, what'd you get? What did you get for this? And so, participation in labs and whatnot, sometimes it was obvious that I was not in 7th grade. Other times I was keeping up just fine, maybe, and again, answering questions if they asked. So I knew stuff. I was fine. But ultimately, it added distraction. I think ultimately it was not the best. It was a workaround. It was not ideal. I was fortunate to have several really good teachers. Hey, I bet I'm going to mention Debbie Reeker again. Even in public school, the likes of Mr. Foster at Royal Palm for advanced biology, Mr. Clumby, who I think I've talked about before, for civics, an actual Vietnam veteran with missing limbs. He had a lot of, and strangely not overly opinionated. He had opinions, of course, and he would express them, but very transparent, a teacher about civics, which I think has been lacking in recent decades. Zeke Ashley, of course, for math. Mrs. Wolf, Catherine Wolf, for our literature pursuits and driving the school paper, which I was a typesetter for, and a variety of other good teachers at the junior high school level. And then, high school. Special shout out to the late Debbie Reeker. Hey, I was right. For not letting me run errands for her all day in lieu of learning. And my high school teachers were pretty good as well. Special shout out to Jack Trudeau. I'm sure he passed away a long time ago. He was a real, on par with Zeke Ashley, Shirley, chemistry and physics, and of course, Geraldine Garrity for calculus. Some good teachers. I was told one time that being able to name teachers, and I can, first grade, not counting Mrs. Urban at Berkeley Elementary in New Jersey, but, Mrs. Conger, who then got married and was Mrs. Nunez, or Miss Conger to Mrs. Nunez, Mrs. Kearns, Rika Raker in third. Fourth grade was Gilman Shull. Seventh grade, that was fourth grade. Fifth grade was Carnes Delfgaw, so team teachers. And then Rika Raker, etc. And then sixth grade, we started switching classrooms. So I had Debbie Reeker again and a few other teachers. She was my kind of homeroom teacher and clearly an advanced teacher in general. And then junior high school, there are a lot of teachers. I just named some of them high school and so on. But I've been told over the years that having that level of recall and being able to associate certain things with particular teachers from early days is not typical. And that's unfortunate because teachers at that time have a substantial impact on later outcomes. And I don't know if that goes recognized. On the other hand, I will often tell people that paying teachers more is appropriate, but it doesn't mean the teachers today would be making more, if that makes sense. I'll just leave that there. Controversial take. So, no more Air Force. I was taking AFJ, Air Force Junior, ROTC, through high school, and my application was into the U.S. Air Force Academy. I was actually on a track through, it was John McCain's first senatorial term. He was a freshman senator from Arizona. So I was sitting through his committee discussing a possible appointment to Annapolis, but I was not feeling a move to Maryland. So I was really trying to get the U.S. Air Force. My plans were to pursue aeronautical engineering and learn to fly in school, which is part of the curriculum at the Air Force Academy. You can skydive and get your glider pilot's license, and then you can pursue a general aviation license as well, part of your academics. Then go on to fly and go on from there. So I had always had this interest in flying. I think flying is fascinating. When I went to Luke Air Force Base in where is Luke Air? It's west of Glendale. I can't remember what city. Is it in Litchfield, I think, maybe? Litchfield, Arizona. So I went to Luke Air Force Base for my physical. They do a completely dilated eye test to test actual uncorrected vision, unassisted. So your lens is relaxed and so on. They can measure the geometry of your eye in actual image resolution, probably making use of the Rayleigh criterion, which you can read about yourself. I've read about it many times. It's my standard statement whenever I get my eyes examined. Oh, we're using the old Rayleigh criterion, and that always, 100% of the time, will get the optometrist. Usually it's not, I don't think I've seen an ophthalmologist in quite some time, but the optometrist, usually we're in a dark room and I have one eye covered. When I say Rayleigh criterion, they always go, oh, yeah, okay, so you know some things, and that makes the conversation go a little bit better. The Rayleigh criterion is about resolving images at a distance. That's all. Pretty simple. It's what you're doing with your eyeballs. So I took this test. It's required for pilots. And back then, things have changed since. So this was back in 1988, 89, a long time ago. I think they were still flying propeller-driven aircraft back then. The requirements for pilot were uncorrected 20/20. That means no radial keratotomy, no astigmatic keratotomies, no contact lenses, obviously. So uncorrected 20/20 vision or better to be a pilot. They had the ability to filter people out because it was in demand. Top Gun had come out. People were all into military aviation. It was a big thing. So after the examiner told me that he would write down 2020 for my test results, he said it was likely the last time that my vision was right on the edge and probably end up getting outside of this uncorrected requirement to fly. So he said, just be aware, by the time you finish college, you are unlikely to have flight ready vision. I'll probably get bounced out of flight school. So when I was at Harvey Mudd College, instead of going to the Air Force Academy, I took my full ride Type 1, I guess, scholarship, Air Force ROTC. I was pursuing an engineering degree at Harvey Mudd, and I would be pursuing my commission with the Air Force through AFROTC and my scholarship. But knowing that I wasn't quite going to get where I thought I was going with the Air Force, even though it was a full ride scholarship, and also I was liking the engineering side of this crazy school. Harvey Mudd's kind of weird. I don't think it's as good as it used to be, in my opinion. The value proposition flipped a bit, and I decided to drop the scholarship. The free money is hard to turn down, but ultimately it was the right thing to do. It turns out the AFROTC program, the scholarship and whatnot, on the Harvey Mudd campus, because it was actually at USC, not properly a part of the campus life of Harvey Mudd, it really was kind of disruptive. So ultimately it would have been problematic for me and the pursuits I actually spent my time on during my college career. So the fact that I didn't have a car, trying to get to USC for the participation there, they would eventually come to Harvey Mudd. So they would, as the number of students enrolled in the program reached a certain critical level, so they would occasionally come and visit. I did get a really good score on the ASVAB, the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, because we had taken it when I was in JROTC in high school. So I had gone through, JROTC is allegedly good for about a year or maybe 3 semesters of AFROTC. So I had already taken the ASVAB and the AFOQT, the Air Force Officers Qualifying Test, which I also did really well on. So when I informed the captain of the unit at USC that I was departing the program, he literally came up to me, I think we were in the bathroom, and said, I was really disappointed to hear that you're leaving, and you did really well, and the test said really, really, really well, really at the top of our range of the students we have and so on. So a little guilt trip, completely ineffective. So I pursued engineering. So yeah, engineering. Remember, I was going through college with only hints at the internet. So this is back in 89 through 93. So entering 89, 90, departing 92, 93. 4 years. Those are the years. Hopefully that adds up correctly for you. But those are the actual years, with nearly all of our research and efforts in general passing through paper books and lecture notes and whatnot. There was actual cracking of books, book bindings, opening actual books in the library. I worked in the library. I've talked about that previously. This meant a lot of collaboration and reading and tracking down details on top of hands-on, plain old experimentation and classical engineering methodologies. Reading, talking about things. It's something of a lost art, perhaps. I've noticed that more recently in recent years. Part of our required class load was called Experimental Engineering, E54, no longer taught at Harvey Mudd College. They replaced it with E89, I think it is, and it's you do build model rockets, but it's not quite the same. And if there's one thing that's inevitable, it is change, but it's too bad. It included a laboratory assignment that was about 6 hours a week. I think it was 3 hours on a nighttime, and then the second 3 hours in the following afternoon, which allowed you some overnight recovery from the total chaos. These were all laboratory classes, so actual hands-on experimental engineering with devices and methodologies and mathematical models and so on that we had not actually learned about in a lecture or in a classroom setting. And it turns out this is often how engineering actually works. So even though it was grueling and extremely difficult and very frustrating often, it was not scientific research. Usually scientific research, you have weeks, months, years. This was, hey, here's a problem, and you have today and tomorrow to solve it. Figure it out. But I don't know anything about this. Welcome to the world. So much as trying to solve problems is what this was. Not a scientific laboratory, but here's a problem. We need to solve it, which is it's where we might understand some of what is happening, but not necessarily, the complete science. So you're really looking for, okay, why is this happening? What is happening? Why is it happening? What can we do to change it or stop it or fix it or whatever it is? Other times we may have no idea. So we may have some idea. We may have no idea. There may be an inkling or a complete loss of notion. This was often the case. These were some problem. And one of my favorites was the torsional pendulum lab. So imagine a steel rod fixed at the top of I think it was like an O-ring stand or something attached to the lab bench. A steel rod, and then connected at the bottom of the steel rod to a paint can, metal paint can. And then the paint can had at the bottom under it a little place where you could mount metal weights. So you could change the mass, the rotating mass of the paint can with these weights. In the paint can, why would you use a paint can for this? In the paint can, you could place a variably viscous solution of antifreeze and water. I think it was just those two things. So you could vary the density and thus the damping properties of the fluid that was in the paint can. So we were supposed to design a torsional pendulum that would have a particular period, particular rotation velocity, and so on. The professor at the time, Professor Phil Cha, was chuckling to himself the year after I took the class. So I was a laboratory assistant the following year working for this new professor. So he didn't know that you're not supposed to say these sorts of things. So he comes up to the lab, myself and our other laboratory assistant, Dave and Dan, if you ever saw the Olympics back in those days. Yep. Not us. The professor came up to us and said, this is a really weird lab because it can't be solved. Really? Yeah, this is a really, really complicated differential equation that you cannot possibly solve using this methods. And really, it's really difficult to solve. You're basically going for an empirical solution. You're just going to kind of, test a value, increase, see if that's closer, and so on. So you iterate through some variable values for your viscosity of your damping fluid. You could change the mass of the paint can a little bit to get some course changes. You would change the fluid inside to change the damping a little bit more finely, and ultimately, hopefully, end up with the desired period and of rotation, of oscillation, you could say. And the problem is we didn't know that, except for Dr. Cha telling us. So if you didn't know that, you might think, we have to solve this. And if you don't know that things are unsolvable, if they're not solvable using the methodology you are trying, you have to step back and say, okay, this is not working. What do we have and what can we deduce from what we have? So the solution was to show your work, show your data points on either side of a target oscillation period, and then recognize that, okay, we were able to experimentally conclude with the desired target oscillation period using this methodology. And here's our data that showed, we were under, we were over, we were changing the viscosity, and so on. So yeah, that was an interesting revelation. A little bit after the fact, but during the class, it was definitely clear, like, oh, we have to be able to do things that we don't already know. Right? We didn't take a lecture on this, or sit in a lecture, get some notes, some instruction, and then go and do it. That's the typical, freshman or high school chemistry and physics. Like, okay, here's what you're going to do. Now do it. This was do it, and then later we might tell you what you were supposed to do. And that's real life. Part of our required class load then, experimental engineering, probably one of the most impactful parts of our class load. So if you have no idea what's going on, just start writing things down. Observe patterns in the mist. Generally speaking, looking for answers when the questions were vague and the resources available were found in books. It was kind of right up my alley. Like, give me get ye to the encyclopedia. Da, 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 da. And actually, if in our lab for E54, if you go out the lab doors, go to the right, end of the hallway, turn left to where the machine shops were for the other part of E54, building the screwdriver, tool tray, and hammer, there was an elevator in the hallway that would go up into the library. So you were directly connected to the library. Perfect. So specifically, though, in systems engineering, that's where I ended up landing, as it turns out. Now, Harvey Mudd College offered, I think they still do, a general engineering degree, which meant coursework in electronics, chemical, materials, mechanical, and other engineering disciplines, communications. No, not presenting speeches to classes, although that was also important. Communications was link equations, satellite to ground station signaling, Shannon information theory. The list goes on. So actually, how do you move bits from here to there and back again? Actually, even though we didn't really, it's an important thing, but just how important compressed data and transferring data through a transmission medium like, internet cables or satellite links or cellular radios. These were all, we were only just realizing as students, and the professors had a better idea, but just realizing as students just how critical something as interesting and essential as information theory would be with regard to communication with the internet and so on, TikTok videos and whatnot. So not to mention, by the way, I just mentioned the engineering side. So Harvey Mudd had, you'd take a third of your classwork or coursework in your major, which you would select in your sophomore year. So most of these you'd get out of your way, or they would get out of your way. You'd get them out of the way in your first year. So we had to take the basic core sciences, chemistry, physics, biology, lab sessions for these. So there was a chemistry lab and a physics lab. You could take a biology lab, I think, if you wanted to, but optional. And then linear algebra, differential equations, partial differential equations, learning more than we thought we would ever need to know about Helmholtz resonators, which are waveguides, which are used not only in microwave transmission and reception, but also in speaker building. The waveguide, very important to understand. And the partial differential equations that model it. Not to mention the other third, the third of the thirds, an overall load in humanities, third of the overall load. Humanities like psychology and philosophy and economics. All of these they actually do have a scientific element, so to call them just humanities is somewhat dismissive. Just like a basket into which you throw your laundry and, psychology and economics, those are easy. They actually have a lot of science and scientific method behind them. Economics is really heavy on discrete modeling. It would be incorrect to dismiss it as just hand waving, although it is also sometimes completely accurate to dismiss it as hand waving. So a little bit of both. I found most of this interesting, but the interactions, the causes and effects, these are where I found my actual fascination. So as we're learning about all these things, like the interconnectedness of all things, if you are a Dirk Gently Holistic Detective fan from Douglas Adams, I believe that's from that book, right? It was either that or from Hitchhiker's Guide, the Improbability Drive, but I believe it was Dirk Gently. I believe. As it turns out, systems thinking applies to all things, whether history or economics or medicine or social psychology, and of course, engineering. How do I don't know who writes these notes. They should be fired immediately. How do events and interactions on one side, maybe the before side, impact the other side? Maybe it's the after side, right? So before we had this, after we have that, what happened in the middle? What's going on here? So how do these things work? What's going on? And how can we measure the things? How can we measure this change? How can we control the transformation? Can we? Is it controllable? Is it observable and controllable if you're into control systems? State space especially. Or can we learn from it and apply what we learn somewhere else? So can we take can we take a fluid dynamics story like the torsional pendulum and apply it to the way society works and responds to different scenarios, like, oh, the economy is good, but I think it's bad, and then we'll overcorrect and everything will shift in one direction, and then we'll start to go in the other direction, like, oh, everything is good except that it's not really, or so you can actually map some systemic systems thinking between disciplines and possibly find some new ideas that way, which I think is interesting. This took a while to really connect, which is sort of ironic since this is a matter of systems thinking to understand my preferences for systems thinking. But ultimately, this is where I landed. And while my time in Silicon Valley was interesting with the work that I took part in on various computer hardware projects, Philips Electronics, Apple Computer, UMax Computer, Leapfrog Educational Toys, then that list goes on. Not to mention working at Netscape on the internet and Apple on System 7 and the transition from classic Motorola 68000, 68040, etc. processors to the new and shiny PowerPC, which would not last very long in the grand scheme of things. But being able to work in the software area, worked in the Newton Group for a while at Apple. Netscape was a lot of encryption and browsing technologies in general. So a lot of hardware, a lot of software, a lot of like systems thinking, but realized as computer hardware and software. And various other pursuits in Silicon Valley that were, Radio Sunnyvale, taking leadership Sunnyvale and understanding how cities work. Various other endeavors like food trucks. How do moving markets and moving customers actually converge upon each other? How do they discover new possibilities of converging? Where was my favorite food truck and where is it going to be next week? These were all Lego bricks, if you will, that added to the overall structure that I was building with my Legos, which is the incorrect use of the brand, the Lego bricks, Lego plastic bricks. So this overall structure that also included more and more bricks from history and historical lessons that can apply today, and economic theory and actual scenarios of economics, and ecosystem development and how ecology of living things, the biome around us, has a lot of analogs with an entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem, how people function making use of resources to pursue their own ideas with some outcome and so on, and how they affect each other. This is at city scale, and the list goes on. All fascinating. Lucrative is another story. I'll get back to you on that, but interesting and fascinating. Speaking of Lego bricks, and we're coming to the end here, so hang on. The final section. I don't know if I've mentioned this before. I think I have. I generally create a bulleted list of sections. The sections are not, they have a title, heading, but they're bulleted. It's 3 bullet items. The rule of 3 per section. I try not to go beyond that, and I try not to go below that. So it's 3 items, and that's usually about right. You tell me. So speaking of Lego bricks, the Lego letter, which I referred to earlier in the Snopes link, has come into and out of the interest window over the years, and while it has been shown to be a real thing at various times by referring to statements from someone at Lego at some point, I think it was Lego in Ireland, or you can read the Snopes page. I read it earlier, but it's not open in front of me. Photos that have been debunked, photos of the actual letter, they've been debunked, and then debunkings have been debunked, and later everybody agreeing that it is probably a real thing. Ultimately, Snopes says it is a real thing. If you believe Snopes, great. The evidence, though, leans heavily towards it being a real thing. At the end of the day, the content of the Lego letter is what actually matters. Itself a truism and most likely actually real. So the letter reads as follows, and again, you can find photos of the letter in the Snopes article and elsewhere on the internets, and they have the text of the letter, which is as follows. And this letter would have been shipped with Lego kits, Lego plastic bricks, sold in boxes to build things. To parents, it says, the urge to create is equally strong in all children, boys and girls. It's the imagination that counts, not skill. You build whatever comes into your head the way you want it. A bed or a truck, a doll's house, or a spaceship. A lot of boys like doll's houses, sorry. They're more human than spaceships. A lot of girls prefer spaceships. They're more exciting than doll houses. The most important thing is to put the right material in their hands and let them create whatever appeals to them. Brief and to the point. Lego is known for its place in the creative space. If you know someone who has never played with Lego plastic bricks, you have met someone who may or may not know how to read or other critical life skills for those of us in the creative thinking or systems thinking, if you like. But anyone who exudes an interest in creativity or working with physical objects and realizing them quickly. Yeah, you have 3D printers today, but Lego is still a true and valuable thing. This thinking can add. This thinking of the Lego letter can and should apply, not add, apply to just about anything. The use of Lego, the notion of Lego, it doesn't even have to be Lego. It could be anything. Young minds are not aware of the world, but they will find interestingness around them, some things more interesting than others. In my travels with Intel, for example, my more recent work with a big company, and see where that got them. It wasn't my fault. I could see many young people even then, doing my day job, which was working with young people of various ages and skill levels and interests and so on in the maker arena. I could see in many young people who were given the runway for their own good sake to explore. And we could all watch them doing interesting things at hackathons and in general. The age of streaming, of publishing blog articles and videos. Here's how I did this. Here's what I'm working on. Here's what I'm making. There are very active people still on Twitter, but also on Mastodon servers, now on Blue Sky. They blog. They publish their own stuff. They create videos. They take plenty of pictures. Here's how I'm doing this. They share with others. They have developed a complete collection of tools to interact and describe and to share, to learn, to advance their own causes and so on. These are not necessarily systems thinkers, but these are people who think in terms of collaboration, and they do think about systems, whether it's explicit or not. Like, hey, if I share this thing, I can get responses that may help me, may help others as well, and everybody wins. So, I just gave away my final sentence of this audio program. Oh well. That's not a bad thing. Not everyone is going to enjoy engineering, which is too bad, but a fact we must accept. The thing is, most people will have something. They will find something. It is important that they be allowed to figure out what that something is and pursue it. And then everybody wins. So it's sort of blew the ending there, but so much the better. So there you go. Turns out I've always liked what I'm doing. I just didn't know what it was. And I'm going to guess if I had gone into the Air Force and become a pilot, I would have had a fine time. It turns out the Air Force was downsizing. So I think I would have had it was a little bit over a year per year. So if I had a 4-year full ride scholarship at Harvey Mudd, I would have had, I think, a 5 or 6 year, I think it was 6 years, maybe 5.5 or something, commitment. But other people who were in my class and attending the ROTC program and its classes and coursework, because of this downsizing, they got the full scholarship, but then I think they had to serve like 2 to 3 years. So if I was flying and that's what I really wanted to do, that would have actually been a negative, right? But as it turns out, I think, the eye thing obviously didn't help. But I think ultimately I'm more interested. And aircraft is a collection of systems thinking. It's how airfoils work. It's how, and by the way, I mentioned state space control systems. aircraft control is like the primary example of how state space works. Is your flying system observable and controllable? And you can represent that state at any given time, and how the alterations to control services as inputs will create outputs that are also observable. So you have a controllable and observable system. Bam. So systems thinking does creep into everything regardless. And so it has been something that has become more and more interesting to me every time there's a new topic or a new subject, generally, or a specific topic, maybe relevant to things that I'm encountering, engaged in, discussing, pondering, to see where that fits into some overall bigger picture. The challenge is to be able to describe that to people. Here's what I am thinking, and here's how it fits into these other things. Usually a blank stare, or I'm sometimes told, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, actually, I kind of do. So then the joy comes from showing, not telling. Most people are not comfortable hearing about things. They'd rather see them. That's why hackathons work. The goal of a hackathon is typically to go from notion to tangible object. Even if it's not done, it's something that you can say, see, this is what I'm talking about. So anyway, we're coming in under an hour, which is good. Spent all day Tuesday speaking to people at Eureka Park at CES. Eureka Park is where the startups are. So as I was talking to somebody from Kickstarter, and I said, the nice thing about Eureka Park is no matter who you're talking to here, there's a really good chance that you're speaking to someone who is the founder of a company, the chief scientist, the lead designer, the people who actually work there. Whereas if you go to the main hall, the Las Vegas Convention Center, where everybody goes with their cameras to collect B-roll footage, wandering through the hallways of booths and glitz and glamour and large displays and tons of people, those booths that are owned by the likes of Intel, for example, or Samsung, or never Apple. They do their thing in San Francisco. But these are often staffed by contractors, by sometimes employees of the company. As an employee of Intel, I did work in the booth at CES 1 year or 2 years. I think it was 1 year officially. And then the second year, maybe kind of unofficially. Since I do live in Vegas, I said, hey, I already live here. You don't have to buy me a plane ticket or anything. So the ability to work in the booth of a company you work for is not like an automatic. It's not something you should assume. If you walk into a booth at CES, the person you're speaking to may have no idea what they're talking about. But if you go to Eureka Park, you're almost certainly. And so in my discussions through the day on this first day, Tuesday, I spoke to a chief scientist at a company in Hong Kong that's doing platinum deposition on a carbon substrate for construction of transmission lines. So we had a discussion about insulation and water trees, which was a research project I was part of at Harvey Mudd. And we talked about depositing silver nitrate in the water trees to make them visible in a transmission electron microscope, and we got published for that. So that was an interesting conversation. And we also talked about innovation and young people and so on. So you never know who you're going to talk to, but when you go to something like Eureka Park at CES, which I think is drastically undersold, you encounter the people who are really doing things. When you go to the big show at the convention center or at Westgate or some other spots of the overflow, you're going to get people who are talking about things that they don't actually have real experience with. They're not the people that are making it or that really truly understand it. They're probably just trying to sell it to you, or even less connected. They're just being paid to talk to you. I'm not trying to insult those people, but there is a difference. You're either talking to a person who is handing you food, or you're talking to the person who prepared the food. So if you have a question about seasoning, there's one person who's better to talk to about than the other, perhaps. Both are important. So it depends on what you're looking for. I prefer Eureka Park, and that is where I will leave today's episode. Thank you so much for listening, as always. And do check out the buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo posts page, which is linked at the top of the profile. You can catch up on the micro episodes that I publish every Monday morning, and we'll see what happens from there. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.